everyone, and welcome to our, what are we on? We're on our fourth or fifth talk of today. I can't remember. It goes by so quick, but thank you for joining us for another Marketing Showcase online keynote webinar. Today, I'm joined by Andy Smith from Corp Data, who's going to be presenting his talk on marketing through a recession. It's a really good talk. I've seen an adaptation of this one previously. You may know Andy's done a few of our talks now at Marketing Showcase online, and he's always well received. So really looking forward to this one. Just before we get underway with Andy's talk, I just want to run you through a few bits on Zoom as the last couple of people join our call today. You've got the chat, which is on the toolbar at the bottom if you're using a desktop. You can put in there, hello, just let me know you're here. Why don't you tell me how you're getting on today? Are you enjoying today's Marketing Showcase online? Is there anything we could work on? Give me a little bit of feedback when you're saying hello in the chat. If this is your first webinar, you can use the chat to talk to me and your other colleagues. Separate to that, we have a Q&A function. In there, you can reserve your questions for Andy Smith. When we get to the end of his talk, I'd love to share a few of those on your behalf and get Andy's answers. So look, I'm not going to waffle on for much longer. I'm really looking forward to getting to Andy's talk, and I'd like to welcome him to the stage.
Good afternoon. Hopefully the technology's worked and I'm now with you. Yeah, welcome to this little talk. We're going to be talking about marketing through a recession in just a moment. As Ash has just alluded to, I've done a number of talks over the last few years. Mostly they've been about GDPR. So I'm really pleased to be able to mostly move off of the sort of scary stuff about what happens if you get the law wrong and all that sort of thing, to the slightly more positively minded bit about achieving great marketing outcomes. So without further ado, I'm going to try and share the screen when we find the technology either does or doesn't work. And so hopefully now we've got marketing through a recession slideshow up on the screen. So first things first, what the heck's a recession? Well, a recession, of course, is all sorts of different technical definitions for it, but generally speaking, it's regarded as a period of slowdown where there's a contraction in general economic activity. So there's less good news coming out in the sort of financial results and things like that. That's brilliant. And it's exactly the definition that a politician or an economist or somebody like that might need to rely on. But of course, that's not, for most of us anyway, really what matters. For us, a recession probably means this type of thing. It means that some of your clients will probably go bust, and some of your clients will probably defect to other suppliers because their needs have changed or their financial realities have changed or something else. Long and the short of it is you're going to lose some of your custom. And that's a painful thing because it's an extra hurdle now that within your marketing efforts, you're going to have to help overcome. You're going to have to replace that erosion that may take place within your marketplace. But it's not all bad news. There's some good news too, because in practice, some of your competitors are going to go bust as well, and some of your competitors are going to struggle to satisfy the needs of their clients, bearing in mind they too are changing and evolving with these new situations in terms of recession and so on. And those opportunities, those new customers who you can go and capture, is the corollary, is the flip side of the fact that inevitably you will lose some, you will have the chance to gain some. But to do that, you're going to need to be marketing to them, you're going to need to be talking to them, and you're going to need to be talking to them using the messages that seem to matter to them at the moment. One of the main things I guess I'd say about recessions generally are that they're times of change. And technically, of course, we've had a recession just ended according to the figures that we've had come out recently. As soon as the lockdown was over, the recession started to lift up and we had an economic bounce back. I don't think anybody's suggesting we had it back to where it was, but not back to the pre-pandemic level, but it was very much on the increase again. I have to say, I think with the new lockdown, that's probably going to push us very much back into recession, and probably we'll be looking to try and recover from that as the next few weeks and months go through. But during this period of recession, basically there's going to be a lot of change. Some of your customers are going to go, and some new customers are there to be capitalized on and to won over and fall in love with them. I just wanted to bring this particular chap into focus for a moment. Mr. Rockefeller here was famously one of the most successful businessmen in the States, made nearly all of his money actually during the Great Depression, which is a recession on steroids. So he made nearly all of his money in that particular climate when times were bad and times were tough. He was successful beforehand, but he really, really exploded his success during that period. And he said a number of interesting things when looking back, I suppose. The first one was, he said, don't be afraid to give up the good to go for the great. Okay, so don't stick with stodgy old stuff. If now maybe you need to be doing something different, do something different. He also said something much the same again. If you want to succeed, you should strike out on new paths rather than travel the worn paths of accepted success. And again, it's very much saying, don't just stay bunkered down, look beyond what you're currently doing. Maybe you need to be doing something different to achieve this great success. And then, of course, he ruined all this wonderful clarity because he also said things like this. I do not think that there is any other quality so essential to success of any kind as the quality of perseverance. It overcomes almost everything, even nature. So on the one hand, he's saying, be prepared to change and give up and don't keep flogging a dead horse. And on the other one, he says, keep flogging it. It probably isn't dead yet. Keep persevering. So clearly there's quite a large amount of contradiction there. And I suppose if we tried to pick something out of Mr. Rockefeller's wisdom, it would be try and figure out what's a dead horse and what isn't, but don't necessarily leap to conclusions there. In fact, he said one other thing, and this is the one I really wanted to focus on today. He said that he always tried to turn every disaster into an opportunity. And I think this is kind of an important mindset as much as anything else. It's the idea that it is an opportunity if you can see your way through it. So yes, some customers disappearing or going bust is a right pain, but equally there are new ones becoming available. And this desire to look for the positive within any situation will allow you to find those positive outcomes. If you don't look for them, you definitely won't find them. Anyway, enough of Mr. Rockefeller for a moment, because the other part of my talk was marketing through a recession. So we generally understand that a recession is a slowdown in the economy, but marketing is a different type of thing for different people as well. For some people, it means just winning some new customers. For others, it might mean understanding the shape of the evolving marketplace through market research and all sorts of other things. In my particular case, I'm going to try and split it just into two areas, both of which are basically all about promoting and selling products and services and evolving your market awareness and your market brand. But the two sides I wanted to sort of split it into is there's the strategic marketing side and then there's the tactical marketing side. The strategic marketing side, quite simply, is about understanding the marketplace that you are positioned to deal with. Understand perhaps what changes and evolutions are going on there as well. Define your strategic objectives. What do you want to be? What do you want to develop? Quite possibly, this is effectively half of a business plan, the commercial side of a business plan. Where do you want to be in a year or in 5 years' time? And then you're going to need to plan all of the changes that you're going to need to make in order to achieve those objectives. So, what are you going to have to do to make all that come true? On the tactical marketing side, frankly, it's the actions or the actual tactics that you are going to need to do to achieve those strategic objectives from the other side. So it's all the steps you're going to have to do to make those sales come true or those customers come across to you and start buying into your product. To be able to make that work and work optimally, you're going to have to do something else though, which is you're going to have to measure the results. And ultimately on the back of that, you're going to have to refine and improve the way you do the marketing to be able to build on those results and improve ultimately the commercial success that you gain. It may not seem that important, but actually if you can improve every facet of what you're doing by a small amount, it'll dramatically impact on the overall success of your marketing program or campaign that you're involved in the future. Strategic marketing then. First of all, understand the marketplace. And that may sound obvious, but the first part about that is to seek the feedback. Quite often it's tempting to imagine that we know our marketplace, we know their reality, we know what they say to us because they've said it to us before. The first thing I say to you is we're talking about a time of great change here, and to be able to make this work, you are going to need to actually be seeking their feedback with open ears and looking to hear, looking to see the things which are a little bit different than you might have otherwise expected. Maybe you will find that some of your products need to be adjusted, tweaked maybe in some way, shape or form. Perhaps you'll need a slightly cheaper, light version available for those clients who are struggling a little bit financially. Maybe your message is no longer appropriate in the way you deliver it because people have a different paramount concern in their mind, and their concern is to do with recessions or their customers or something like that. And actually you need to perhaps redirect your message in the place that's most sensitive for them. Maybe based on perhaps something you've done before, you have a whole new product available to you, which you can now serve up and which people basically are clamoring for if only you were to deliver it and launch it. I have to say it's difficult to do that from a standing start, but quite often you might find that your product can be repurposed in some way, shape or form. The consultancy you deliver, the service you offer can be just represented to deliver a slightly different benefit for people. And that may well be an entirely different product when you look at it from the perspective of the marketplace. Maybe though, it's not just the marketplace you're used to already. Maybe there are whole new marketplaces opening up in ways that you wouldn't previously have imagined. The pandemic has caused all sorts of sort of very significant structural changes. I'm, for instance, talking to you from my shed in my garden at the moment, which means there's all sorts of home working type issues and video conferencing requirements and shed heaters, which I really should have invested in already. So there's all sorts of things going on there, which are now creating new opportunities that weren't true just a relatively short time ago. So are there now new marketplaces opening up for you which weren't there before? Having done some understanding of the marketplace, that would then hopefully allow you to define your strategic objectives. This is that business plan thing. So the first thing I'd say is try and be realistic. It's nothing wrong with shooting for the stars, but try and be realistic, because you and all of the other key people within your organization who may be trying to make these things come true will need to be able to stay positive through what might be quite a turbulent time. And it's much easier to do that if you're achieving the things that you set yourself as ambitions rather than consistently failing. Apart from anything else, it gets very difficult to keep justifying the budget being spent on something that never delivers the results that it was meant to deliver. So try to be realistic in the way that you're intending to approach your upcoming marketing. One of the ways you can do that is if you understand your existing or previous marketing return on investment. This doesn't have to be especially sophisticated. Just understanding, for instance, how much money you spend to make how many communications or contacts with prospects, to win how many new clients, would be an immense amount of value when trying to decide how much time, effort and budget you're going to put into these, making these plans come true. If you happen to also know the lifetime value of a client or the amount they'll pay back in the first year or any number of those other things, you will start being able to see through your plans in such a way you can make much more clear decisions about what you're trying to do. Because your objective might be not just the obvious one, it might not be the one that you would have chosen to pursue just a few months ago. I've just jotted down 4 here, that one of them, for instance, might be that your mission, your objective is just to survive, keep all the staff employed, make sure everybody's still gainfully working away at their stuff so that you're still in a position to be there on the other side of a recession. And there's nothing wrong with that. That might well be an appropriate objective. But equally, it might well be your objective is to grow turnover by 10%, or to grow profits by 30%, or to grow your market share by 50%. Now, talking about that is a really strange thing, but growing your market share might be easier now than at any other time in the business cycle. If your competitors are starting to lose clients, this is a time when you can capture them. If some organizations and clients out there are disappearing anyway, there are new ones being formed, and those people don't necessarily have the same commercial relationship and trust with a pre-existing supplier. So they're ready to be captured by you as much as anybody else. However, growing market share typically is quite an expensive thing to do. And you're probably investing quite heavily in doing so on the expectation that there will be payback later. And you sometimes can get that type of thing wrong too. I'm very conscious that just the other day when the news came out about the wonderful vaccine that's in the offing and shares in Pfizer went through the roof, at the very same time the share value for Zoom, which we're using today, disappeared through the floor, because the people could see that at the end of the horizon maybe there wasn't quite such a need for Zoom as there had been for the last few months. We shall see. But market shares are sometimes well worth investing in a time like this, because you may be alone in doing it, and so you may have a fairly clear pitch to win those new business. Having defined what your objectives are, figured out that business plan, you can then set about figuring out and planning all of those changes and steps that you're going to need to be able to meet them, to be able to achieve those objectives. Be alert to change. This recession, any recession, means that there will be an ongoing series of changes, and they won't all have been anticipated. So be alert to other changes that are outside of your 4 walls as well as within your organization, because some of those may need to be reacted to fairly quickly. Despite the fact that I'm talking about reacting fairly quickly though, don't rush. When you rush, there's the potential for making snap judgments without having considered that evidence, that return on investment and the other facts that you've probably got at your disposal to some degree anyway. Try and consider it and plan it and budget it in the normal way. But one of the other key things, just harking back to my GDPR talking for a minute, one of the other key things is if you rush something like this when you're communicating with data subjects, prospects, but you're communicating with people, it would be very easy for you to use the wrong data or use the wrong message in such a way that you upset people. And you only need a few of those complaints getting through to the ICO, and you will be starting to wish that you'd taken the time to exclude the people who told you they didn't want to get emails from you again, or whatever it might be. So don't rush it, do it carefully enough to respect all the wishes of everybody involved. Finally, I'd say be clear about your strategic aims. So having done this business planning exercise, hopefully in collaboration with any other key people within your organization, be clear about what those aims and budgets and so forth are, because that's the thing that you should be trying to hold yourself against. And undoubtedly, there'll be some bits that don't work out as well as you would have wished, and other bits that might surpass your expectations. But be clear about what those strategic aims are, because it will give you the chance to constantly aim in that direction whenever you are needing to rethink something and make an adjustment to your plans that you started with. Which brings us to the tactical marketing side. So these are the actions to achieve all of those strategic aims to make your business plan come true. First things first, despite the fact that my business is in the business of selling mailing lists to try and help you win new business, the first thing I'd say is your priority has to be keeping your existing clients. The time and budget you spend keeping those people happy and on board with you will be so much more effective than what you're trying to do, by and large, trying to win new business. Because within the new business sphere, you also have to persuade them that you're a trustworthy partner that they want to work with, whereas your existing clients probably already know that. So if keeping your existing clients is one of your priorities, then what I would say is absolutely focus on your data. Keep it up to date. Keep in touch with them. Keep talking to these people. The last thing you want to do is go quiet with them so that you don't notice that they're struggling, disappearing, getting bought out over a period of months. Now that might sound a bit strange because actually you may not be able to sell to them during that period of time anyway. Just the cycle of your product may not have delivered that opportunity. But if they're going to be bought out by somebody else, then quite possibly their staff, their relationships and so on will actually be being embedded into another entity. And actually you may have a chance to capitalize on that to actually win this new bigger parent company as a client, if only you keep in touch with your existing relationships so that you can see that happening. Okay. Find new clients. Okay, having looked after your existing clients at a maximum of your ability, find new clients. You're definitely going to need to find some new prospects in your marketplace that you can approach. I draw this distinction. The ones in your marketplace are the ones who would probably be interested in your existing product or service in the same kind of way that you've ever discussed it before. They're the people who your presentation, your brochure, your understanding of their industry or whatever it might be will be sufficiently solid that you have a really good chance of using the same techniques that you've been successful with before. There are new markets, and new markets are always notoriously a little bit harder for you to win in the first place, but now might be a good time to look at it because of all of the change that's going on anyway. Finding new markets, though, will necessitate you having a blank piece of paper sometimes. It will be where you've been successful in selling into engineering companies or something like that, and now you're trying to sell into the healthcare sector for the sake of interest. What are the key pressures and the key issues that the healthcare sector has? What are the key arguments, therefore, that you can use to explain that your product is of great value to them and it addresses their needs? And so it goes on, but you can't necessarily just use the same collateral and the same process that you would have done with your old clients. When you do campaigns in whatever way, keep measuring those results. This is more important now than normally because everything is changing. The changing climate means your results may be more effective or less effective than you would have otherwise anticipated. You need to know these new truths, these new results, this return on investment, penetration, success levels, whatever it might be. But you need to know them because you're going to be making decisions about how to do things going on into the future. And your future decisions will be based on these new facts. If you don't know what the facts are, your decisions are likely to be flawed from the outset. And double check everything about your campaigns for when you see the results. Have a little look at the message, at the targeting and the data quality and any of the other key ingredients that go towards making a good campaign, and figure out whether there was anything that you want to just tweak. You want to try changing a subtly different message or a slightly different data source or something like that. Because actually, if you can find a new route that gives you an extra few % success, then it's well worth understanding that, and the only way you're going to do that is having measured the results in the first place and then done some of these little tests. But then you move into this refinement process. First things first, what has worked better than you might have expected? Because clearly you can just repeat it, you can expand it, and you can give the same thing to more people and hope for these improved results in the process. So definitely just do that. What has worked better than you might have hoped? But also what's worked worse, what hasn't been as effective or successful as you might have liked. Be cautious not to just immediately throw it away just because it didn't work as well as you hoped. Give it a little bit of a tweak and a test. You may well find, if you're not careful, you can persuade yourself to throw away something that's helped you being successful for many years just because of a temporary change in the climate. But it is worth paying attention to it, because you might need to address the industry slightly differently right now because of these changes that are going on. And once again, agile and responsive, yes, absolutely, do that, but don't rush. Yeah, rushing will lead you into disaster, such that you might end up deleting all of your client lists and all sorts of other things if you're not careful. So take the time to think it through, but yes, do be prepared to evolve, because you're probably going to need to. One of the things that I think comes out for me from all of that is that information is key across lots of the different bits that I've talked about there. There's your existing CRM data, there's your new market lists, there's budgets, return on investment, customer feedback, market research. There's so many different bits of information that the more you had and the more accurate and helpful it was, the better. But I'm just going to concentrate on two for a moment. I'm going to concentrate on the existing CRM data, your existing clients, and your new marketing data. So first of all, on your existing CRM customer type data, try to have, there's just a few practical steps I want you to try and do, because I think it will help. Try and have any sales contact that's going on, do data validation, improve it, check it, change it as required, and try and do anything you might need to do for preferences like opt-ins and so on. Try and do anything of that type during those conversations, and make sure you keep appropriate evidence of the fact that you've asked them the question and how they answered it. To do that, if you're talking to people on the phone, for instance, you're definitely going to need to try and have some form of script. Now, it may be not much more than one sentence for that one component of the opt-in, but they're going to have the sentence which they apply fairly diligently and say, so are you happy for us to build you into the email list for future contact or something? Make sure you've thought it through, make sure they've got that in front of them whenever they're having those conversations. Increase the frequency of your contact to your existing clients, because the accelerated change that there is in the industry anyway, caused by the recession, is something that you need to be on top of as soon as you can. It may well be, for instance, that they have 3 offices, but they're centralizing to 1 because times are tough for them. And actually your phone numbers and postal addresses were talking to one of those offices, which is shutting. But actually right now, if you're in touch with them often enough, you can find that you're able to segue your way into talking to them at their head office or their new centralized location. If you've waited months and months and the phone numbers have been cut off with no redirect, it's very tempting for salespeople then just to delete the data record. Whereas in actual fact, there was a route forward to keeping them as a live client, so long as you were on top of them, basically, as long as you were interacting with them on a more frequent basis. And you can also use external data validation. So this might be a sort of a cleansing type service that companies like Corpdata and others can do to find those companies that look like they're going bust, or the records that look like they're already gone bust and so on, so that you can try to track down those people as well as you can if they're still existing somewhere. And if not, at least you can tidy up your data and get your database cleansed so that you're concentrating your energy on the real companies who are really there to listen to you. And definitely you will get other feedback. You will get things like hard bouncers if you send emails. You will get deadlines if you try and phone people up, and you will get postal mailings being sent back to you as gonaways and things like that. All of those things are a bit of a nuisance, and they're a bit of a waste of time and energy and money, but they're also invaluable for you because it will put you on the trail of sorting out your data and keeping on top of this client list, but also potentially in tracking down that client in their new incarnation somewhere before you're unable to join the dots. So follow up on all of this negative stuff, because actually you can find some really good positives through the process. In terms of new marketing data for buying in a list of some sort, first of all, I'd say pick your data sources with care. Corpdata is brilliant. Many other people are also brilliant. But pick your data sources with care, because the data quality you're relying on is actually a really important ingredient in producing the results you're after. The results will be hugely impacted by this data quality in terms of just how many gonaways and returns there might be, but also how appropriate the targeting was to get your message to the right type of people who might be interested in your product or service. But also, and perhaps more scarily these days, your GDPR compliance will be hugely impacted by the data. By which I mean, if they've done a bad job of gathering or maintaining the data, then you're going to have a bad job of trying to use it. It will be the sort of thing there's complaints from, and when the ICO come and ask you questions about it, you're going to really struggle to say, I got some stuff that was scraped off the internet because it was cheap. When the ICO says, well, how does that comply with full GDPR obligations, and you're unable to answer that question. So do your due diligence on your suppliers and pick with care. And when it comes to targeting, be like Goldilocks. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because it's actually the subject of another talk I'll be giving through Marketing Showcase in a few weeks' time. But targeting specifically is an art, and it can be done wrong. So be a bit like Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold. In this case, not so tightly that you're missing out on viable, lucrative prospects, people who should and could become clients, but equally, not so wide that you've got 200,000 records and only the budget to try and talk to 1,000 people. You do need to sort of obviously balance these things. If your business plan calls for you marketing to 10,000 people, then yeah, great if you've got a list available of 15 to 20,000, but you definitely don't need to have 100,000. So targeting is a bit of an art, and hopefully your data supplier will be able to help you. And it's one of the things that incidentally we often help people with. And one of the things that's included in your digital goodie bag today is a free consultation with one of the consultants if you need it. Consider multiple marketing mediums, by which I mean, I've already touched on emailing and post and so on. They're all different, and your different prospects have different receptiveness to these things. So it may well be that if you're trying to sell to restaurants, hopefully not just at the moment because they're not going to be listening to you, but hopefully if you're trying to sell to restaurants in a few weeks' time, by and large, they tend not to like telesales approaches because they like to keep the phone free for taking reservations for meals. But they might be very much more receptive to receiving a brochure which they can read whilst they're sorting out the bookings for later on that day. So you need to try the different mediums, and that will change from prospect to prospect. So one of the things that I would say is try a variety, mix them up a little bit. You anyway will find that you benefit from your brand building exercise if you have multiple touches on a prospect. Most of the marketing books will talk about having to do 5 or 7 touches, depending on which marketing book you read, before you build a rapport with somebody in such a way that they trust you and your brand. So even if you've done 2 emails and 2 letters, you're a long way in the direction of having that brand built. It can multiply your possible audience, and the multiple touches will help you build your brand recognition. It also means that just because somebody has, for instance, registered on the telephone preference service, doesn't mean to say that you never talk to them because your only way of marketing was by phone. It avoids people being kept in the blind spot. And interestingly, it's worth noting that if somebody is registered on TPS, that doesn't mean they don't want any marketing. It means they didn't want telephone marketing, and you're obliged to respect that. But actually, they may therefore now be receiving far less offers from your competitors because they also can't market to them in that way. So if you are prepared and able to send them a letter or an email, then in actual fact, you may well be talking to an audience that's more receptive rather than less receptive, but you do have to do it in the way that they wished. That's pretty much it for now. There is just this one other area, which is the idea of moving into new markets. And it's a bit of a longer conversation than we really have time for. But if you're imagining that you, for instance, have a marketplace and it's vaguely like this Rubik's Cube, and that you live in this top corner there, in actual fact, what that Rubik's Cube is meant to depict is that there's, in multiple dimensions, lots of different facets of organizations and clients and prospects that you could deal with. And you're dealing with people in a certain industry, in a certain part of geography, in a certain way, with certain job titles and so on. And that's what that star indicates. I suppose the key message here is, if you're trying to look into an adjacent but similar industry, key thing here would be to not change too many things at once. Try and just change one or two bits, and only a little bit if you can. So you're moving into a new industry, but one that's very close to one you know already. Because if you can do that, then more of your pre-existing knowledge will still be applicable, and it will mean you're more likely to have been successful, because that knowledge was tried and tested, and you only have one or two little bits you're having to guess at as brand new. So just change one thing at a time. For example, prospect the same types of decision makers, offering basically the same product with basically the same message, but into industries that you wouldn't typically have worked with, or into a different part of the country or the world that you would normally have tried to work with, because you'll probably find that those other bits that stayed the same allow you to still have hit a sweet spot. That pretty much is it for today. Just to remind us that the point of that was we're trying to turn every disaster into an opportunity. And Mr. Rockefeller told us we had to, so we're going to do that. But the point is, the recession will deliver lots of change, and lots of change means lots of challenges, disasters, depending on how you look at it, and therefore lots of opportunities. And again, I just want to come back to this one thing, which is the positive mindset will allow you to look at those disasters and see the opportunities, and that will be gold dust for you. That's the end. Ash, I hope you're there. I'm going to stop sharing if I can.
I'm still here. Thank you very much, Andy. I love leaving that on a positive note. Really appreciate your time and taking us through that talk today. Had lots of feedback. I even had a few people saying they want to get in touch afterwards with regards to having a bit more of a talk, really. So look, on that, I've set up a poll in the same way that I did with previous webinars. I'm just going to launch that live now. So if you do want to talk to Andy or one of his team members after the talk, please do tick yes, please, and I'll be able to share that data with Andy. Totally compliantly, I should add, Andy, right?
Absolutely. As long as everybody knows what you're doing.
Everybody knows what I'm doing. So if you tick yes, please, I'll be able to share your email address and a few of your contact details with Andy, so you can get in touch afterwards and talk you through that in a bit more detail. So that is all we have time for. So again, I just want to thank Andy for his time and everyone for watching. Thank you for tuning in for another webinar. We have 2 left today. Next up is Ali Williams from the brilliant Mark Making. He's going to be talking about branding and how you can have a positive effect on the world. So this really is one not to miss. So make sure you tune into that one. Finally, just before I sign off, Andy will be presenting at our event in December, on the 8th of December. So if you want to see his talk following on from today, please register for next month's event as well. So look, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Andy and the visitors, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks all.